Hey, everybody. Jenny from the blog here. I am here with Thomas with Home Pro Property Management. How are you doing today, Thomas?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. How you doing?
Doing good. Awesome. Well, let's just jump right into it. Obviously, talking about property management today. I'm personally in, moving houses as well as, renting my current house. So understanding the difficulties and, the kind of process with doing that. So let's start with the basics. So, what do property managers do?
Yeah. Well, essentially, a property manager is going to take everything off of your plate that you may need as a landlord. But it's sort of a lot more than that as well. So you're dealing with all the finances of a rental property. That includes preparing tax documents and everything along those lines. You're essentially a general contractor for anything that needs to be fixed in the place or any upgrades or anything along those lines that might be happening. You're helping with the leasing and the background checks and the credit checks and reference checks. And so everything in between, making sure that you've got your perfect tenant in there. And then pretty much anything else you could think of that might come up with a rental property, a property manager is going to handle it. For the most part, at least with us, the only exception is we're not going to actually pay the mortgage directly. We're going to send you guys the money and then you pay it. But that's about it, honestly. Pretty much anything that you can think of: HOAs, condo associations, and everything in between.
Yeah, sounds like you're very busy.
Yeah, I guess you can get pretty busy.
So obviously there are a lot of different property management companies. So what's the benefit of knowing, a good property manager?
Yeah. So even if you're not using a property manager, because actually one of the things that I always throw out there when I'm talking to somebody who's really considering property management is I do consider it a little bit of like a luxury type service, right? If you are next door to your rental and you've got a tenant that's in there forever and everything along those lines, you might not need a property manager. Everything is very convenient for you. Property manager comes into play mostly in the cases where you've got more than one, where all of a sudden now it is taking up a lot of your time to manage the ins and outs. Your rental is a little bit further away from you. So all of a sudden now it takes that much more time to have to drive and everything in between. And then ultimately just you're busy and you don't want to have the headache of taking a call at 3 a.m. So, those are the people that are really looking for a property manager. And really the benefits come with all of those sort of situations. It's making sure that you're getting, if when you have one, it's making sure that you're getting the best work done. You're expediting it. You're understanding the laws and policies around rentals, because that can be a really intricate, delicate sort of balance that you might not understand, especially when things go wrong. And ultimately, having a property manager is essentially like insurance for your rental property, because you are mostly wanting them there when things are going wrong, not necessarily when they're going, smoothly. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So, to kind of get into the details of property management, like what is the challenge of finding a good tenant? Like what are the kind of challenges around that?
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, so maybe you've heard this from some of your other interviewees, but essentially when it comes to a rental property, it's always, price in relation to condition, location, and in a sense, seasonality, although not to the same degree that you might see for a purchase or a sale of a property. And so one of the things that I think is important to sort of mention is, that is essentially what you're doing. You're marketing your property with those 4 characteristics sort of blending together. So finding a good tenant sort of starts before you actually even list the property available, because you're going to want to understand what you're going for, right? So as an example, many people, when they have rental properties, they are sitting there and they'd be like, I just want to get the highest price possible and get somebody in here and make all this money and all that, right? And when you think of it on a surface level, that always sounds really good until you actually put it to practice, because just $50 less a month in terms of the price, when you relate that to the condition and location and everything, $50 less a month all of a sudden gets people banging down your door feeling like they're going to miss out on this deal. and it's getting really, really good applicants. Which is sort of the next step of me answering this question. But really good applicants come out of the woodwork because they don't want to miss out, and they don't flounder out there, right? Typically, if your property's a little bit, on the high end of the market, what you're going to get is you're going to get the people that don't have any option, right? So what that means is you're getting people with poor credit, and everything along those lines. So that's sort of step one is recognizing, hey, maybe I can skip the vacancy because somebody who was a really good tenant who's going to take care of my property is going to stay longer. Maybe I can do that by simply dropping $50 a month. And by doing that, you're able to get people in so quickly as well that are really they're really good applicants because, again, they're not wanting to miss out. And when you do the math, I mean, $50 a month is like $600 a year that you're missing out on. But every week that your rental's out there is probably very close to that number. Every few weeks, you're going to be losing that $600 anyways. So if you're talking about turnover, well, now all of a sudden, it's really it's a no-brainer at that point. So that's sort of the first piece is sort of the marketing and finding the right price. But then after that, obviously, when it comes to finding the right tenant, let's say people are banging down your doors, there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to be looking for. Credit score for sure is always the first thing that comes up. It turns out you want to stay above 650. And the reason for that is national studies have shown that people or tenants who have a credit score of lower than 650, it's actually correlated with problematic tenants, things that are going wrong in the property, things that tenants that might not be paying on time, tenants that might be just doing damage and things along those lines. So that's sort of the first thing is your credit score above 650. Your second one is an income to rent ratio of above 2.5. So what that means is if you make $100 or if the rent is $100, then the person needs to make $250. And that's another one. It's just that number is correlated with a bad tenant, unfortunately. So those are the first pieces. And then obviously we're moving over to the reference checks. We're confirming the income. And with the reference checks, it's actually a pretty in-depth, sort of system that you follow to make sure that everybody's on top of it, which I don't think I have to tell you.
Definitely. Yeah. So obviously you talked a lot about price. So how do you determine rent, as a property manager?
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, it comes down to a number of things. First things first is it is important to recognize that many owners, they're dealing with small margins, especially in our area. They're really slim margins. And so that means you really have to know what you're going to be wanting to put a little bit of money towards and put a little and really not. Like, for instance, with when you're going to sell a home, it's always talking about what upgrades are going to get me the most return for the dollar that I'm investing, things along those lines. Now, with rentals, it's sort of a different conversation. While yes, if you did certain upgrades, you might increase the rental price. It frequently won't be increased by more than $100, $150 for whatever upgrade you do. And when you do the return on investment on that, it doesn't always make sense. So when it comes to finding the price, yes, we're looking at how it stands up for upgrades and things along those lines compared to the comps. And yes, we're looking at location and what's nearby, but ultimately, as opposed to selling, you're not essentially trying to compete as much with the other rentals on the market, if that makes sense. You're really just trying to find your own niche. Because if you're trying to compete with the person who's making top dollar, you're going to make some probably poor investments and throw a lot more money towards something that it's going to take a long time to get a return for. So you're looking at the comps, but you're ultimately finding a little place that's going to carve out your own niche for your property. And the simplest way to do that is to make sure it's clean, maybe some new paint, definitely carpet cleaning. I find that's one of the best return on investments is carpet cleaning, and having a really good carpet cleaner because stains happen, whether it be kids or animals or whatever. And then again, when you find the number that sort of is your closest comp, personally, I find that you get the best tenants, the best everything, and the best experience. Just simply recognizing that if I tweak that price just by maybe $50 less a month, I'm going to get significantly better applicants. So
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's, change it around a little bit and obviously talk a little bit more about you specifically. So obviously you do property management in, Northern Virginia area. So what makes you stand out compared to other property managers with home care?
Yeah, well, ultimately, it just comes down to a recognition of what matters. So there are really good property managers in our area. And unfortunately, just like everything, there's also some not so great ones.
Right.
And a lot of times the difference is going to be one, an attention to detail. Two, a realization that you sort of, yes, I have a fiduciary duty to my clients being the owners, but I sort of have multiple clients. Because I also have the people who are living in the property. And while, yes, my fiduciary duty isn't to them, having a good relationship with them gives you so much more benefits than just sort of treating them as though there's somebody there and they'll figure it out. So being very timely, it's all about the customer service when it comes to being a really like high level property manager, making sure that you're on top of your calls and your texts, making sure that you're answering the phone, making sure you're available 24/7 for the tenants, because ultimately a tenant who's not happy, which can happen due to, them just not feeling like they're heard. Who's not happy is not going to treat your property the way that you deserve. And even more importantly than that, maybe they do treat the property the same, but all of a sudden they're not going to give you some of the little benefits that you might need. Like if they're going to end their lease, now all of a sudden, if you have a really good relationship with them, you can reduce turnover because they have, they're willing to let you work in there before they fully move out, things along those lines. So really good property managers are able to balance sort of your fiduciary duty, making sure that everybody's happy in all, and really just looking for the win-wins in all areas of the rental. And there's also some other things that go on that are just important to pay attention to. For instance, it's important to recognize how property managers are paid, right? It's a business. So obviously, you're attempting to make a little bit of money from it. So there's 3 ways that property managers are paid. And those 3 ways are really important to recognize if you're looking for a property manager, what they're doing, because some of them are sort of swept under the rug a little bit. First one is pretty straightforward. People know it. You're finding a new tenant, you're leasing the property, you're marketing, you're paying for photos, things along those lines. That's going to be some percentage of the first month's rent is going to go towards to the property manager. The second one is obviously the one that's most everybody recognizes, which is the management fee. Every single month, some percentage of the monthly rent is going to go to the property manager for their services. But the third one is swept under the rug a little bit. And it's important to sort of ask questions about this third one if you're looking for a property manager, because the third one is an upcharge when work is done. So a lot of property managers are making the bulk of their income by upcharging when work is done. And that means something goes wrong with the unit. You're not only paying for the contractor, but you're paying X% above, because the property manager is going to be charging that as their general contractor's fee. Different ones might do it, more, might do less, but obviously that's something that you should really have a conversation with them to make sure that everything's in the up and up, and you're really not, you're not being, in a situation and being overcharged for something that might not actually be a big deal.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously you do have an experience and a background working in real estate. So obviously, kind of building community and building, talking with real estate agents. How do you work with real estate agents, and what is the benefits for them?
Yeah, ultimately, there's a whole bunch, because, real estate agents are essentially, in many ways, they're connectors. And that means they need to have the connections when their clients need them. And not even just when the person is their client. It's anybody in their sphere, their database, whatever, any of their friends, family, and anybody they know. People go to their real estate agent as a connector. They say, hey, I have this, I need this, and can you point me in the right direction for this? Whether that be, taxes, whether that be actual work getting done, plumbers, things along those lines. Being a connector is really important and really valuable, because that's how you're making connections with people when they're not selling, so that they obviously, when they raise their hand, they come to you. So having a relationship with a property manager Well, it is our entire job to have those relationships with really good contractors who can get in, do a job, do it for a reasonable price, and do it at a reasonable time. So that's a big thing that sort of benefits agents for sure, is making sure that you have somebody with the connections who they can get you so that you can then show your clients a good time. Now, the next thing is obviously having a good relationship with a property manager allows you to it allows you to be the connector for that. So many of your clients, they might have rental properties and they might be ready to just like, they're driving them crazy because of all the little nuances that come up sometimes. And being able to refer them to a good property manager who you trust is also very important. And who you trust is a good piece, because what you don't want is to send them to a property manager who then, once they eventually decide to sell, are just going to sit there and pocket the transaction themselves. No, that's your relationship. If you refer somebody who to a property manager and they eventually decide to sell, you should make sure that you're going to be getting the sale on the back end where they're going to refer that client back to you. And so that way you get, a continuous business from that as well. So it's looking good by being a connector. It's having the relationship to find more connections with other people and other business owners. And it's making sure that you don't lose out on a client, when eventually they decide to sell.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for jumping on here today and talking about property management. Obviously, if anybody's interested in learning more about property management or connecting with you or asking questions, I did include your website on, in the description. Obviously, I am Jenny from the block. I will be here next week with a different topic. And thank you again, Thomas, for jumping on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenny.
All right. Bye, guys.